Right, everyone. Welcome to week 12. The countdown continues. We are only about 6 weeks away or so from takeoff, so I hope you're getting excited. The weather's starting to turn for the better, that is, and this will help hopefully prepare you for the incredible weather that you'll encounter over there in Italy. It should be pretty warm, very sunny. Warm to hot, actually, but generally speaking, you'll encounter incredible weather this time of year. A little bit warm, but sunny and warm. Okay, so a couple things to note before I go over this week's overview of this week's content. Number one, as I'm sure you know, we have a meeting next week on Zoom. So that's Monday the 10th. That's from 7:30 to about 9:30. The big topics here are you're going to do your Italian history or food presentation. Hopefully you've already signed up for that. And then we'll kind of go over some travel prep. If we have some time, we'll go over some Italian language and maybe some sustainability discussion. So we'll keep it to 2 hours. So be ready for that. That's on Zoom. The link is the same as all the other Zoom links. And also put on your calendar in case you haven't already, the meeting number 4, which is actually in Dover. I'm going to figure out a location, but it'll probably be in the CTC or CEET building, which is near the energy wing. Anyway, keep an eye out for that. So plan on being in Dover from 5:30 to about 8 p.m. That's where you do your group presentations, your tour guide presentation, which I'll discuss here in a minute, and also some additional travel prep. I mean, that's only a couple weeks before takeoff, so excuse my voice. That's a little bit lack of sleep, frankly. All right, so that's that meeting, and then you see meeting number 5 is really important to keep in mind too. So that's after we return, and that's on the 8th of June. So be prepared for that. You should start, be thinking about your group project presentations and so forth. But I'll go over that here in a minute. Okay. So the most immediate thing is next week. Be ready to do your Italian food or history presentation, which will be great. We're very much looking forward to that. And this is your one opportunity to kind of highlight something really interesting about Italian, culture, or something you should experience when you're over there. Okay, so let's go to this week's content. So actually, real quick, so this week's content is water, which I'll go over here in a minute. So a couple of things that I want to note. So I've shifted things around a little bit to try to just make things a little bit easier for you as you finish out the semester. It's probably easiest if we just look at the schedule. So let's just take a look at the schedule here. All right. So this week we have water. Next week we just have permaculture and transition town. So it's really originally I had a couple other things due this week, like group project proposal and stuff like that. So I decided to sort of clear up the schedule so the next 2 weeks are just, this week and next week are just analytical questions or your question set. And then you actually have 2 weeks at the end of the semester where you have very minimal assignments. So I'm hoping you can take that time to get ready for travel, to work on your group project, and also to just finish up your other classes. And so you can see the week after that is just a blog post, which shouldn't take you much time, and then your group project proposal is not due until that point. All right, so you have a little bit of time to think about your group project, work on your group project, and the following week you have your tour guide selection. So this is where you tell me. Or tell everybody actually which location you're going to go over. And so your tour guide presentation, in case I haven't gone over that yet, is you're going to pick a location that either is on the itinerary or you could see while you're over there, and you're going to act as kind of a tour guide for that location, right? So the rest of the class, you want to sort of describe it and what's interesting about it and so forth, and then What's really cool about this, so normally you do something like this and you're like, oh yeah, there's this really cool place in Italy that you could visit, blah, blah, blah. But here it's like, hey, we can visit this when we're over there, and here's why you should do it. So hopefully you take an interest to that. There's a lot. I mean, I have a list of locations. It is by no means comprehensive. There's all kinds of extra stuff up there, but just pick from that list, and you'll see that assignment's posted in the week 15 folder here. All right, so your week 15, it's right there, okay? And then back to the schedule. Let's go back here. Where are we here? Course schedule. All right, so that's week 15, which is the last week of the semester. So that's not a whole lot, right? So again, use that week to get ready for travel, work on your group project in particular. Those are the main things. And of course, finish up your other classes. So the following week, which is actually the week after the semester's over, that's where we have our face-to-face meeting. Okay, so that's our last meeting for now. We may have another one on Zoom. We'll see how much we accomplish during this meeting. So that way, the idea here was to sort of like ease off the pedal a little bit at the end to help you focus on your other classes. And all, you have to still sort of, you should be thinking about and working on, some of your assignments here. But okay, so that's the rest of the schedule. So make note of that. The big change here was that this project proposal and the blog post were originally like one of these 2 weeks, and there was another assignment this week. So I just kind of shifted some things away from that week, from those weeks, to give you a little more time to focus on everything, sort of spread things out. Okay, so take note of that, and all of these dates have been updated here. Okay, so let's take a look real quick at this week's content. So this week's content is water. I encourage you to watch this video that's posted here at the beginning. It kind of gives you a pretty good sense of some of the things that we're going to talk about and some of the issues that that exist with water, and some of the implications of water use, and especially the hidden footprint of our water use. So most of the water that we use we don't see, as you'll find out throughout this lesson. Taking shorter showers and turning off the sink when you brush your teeth. It's all important. It's all good. But that's not where most of your water is being used, and you'll find out where this week. All right. So of course, as usual, we have our quotes and our overview of last week, where we did biodiversity and food and honeybees and slavery. Hopefully, you found that eye-opening. The modern day slavery. And so this week, we have a couple of different topics for water. So first we go over water scarcity and water footprints. And so there's just a couple readings and a couple videos here that really go over our water footprint and what constitutes it. And as I said, you'll find out that most of the water we use has nothing to do with like the stuff that you actually see at home or in a commercial building or whatever. It's most of the water you use is hidden, and primarily, not to give away the whole plot here, but primarily it's due to the food that you eat and the energy that you use. And I'll let you dig into the details here. There's a lot of good information in these videos, a couple of short videos, and then this is a pretty interesting. This is a product gallery where you can look at different products, everyday things like eggs and cheese and milk and beer and that sort of thing, and see like the hidden water footprint. So it's pretty eye-opening, well-sourced and all that. And here's a little piece of a documentary about water scarcity issues across the world and some of the implications therein. And they're pretty stark. There's some pretty awful circumstances internationally, in particular, in terms of lack of access to fresh water. Contaminated water is one of the biggest killers of people across the world, from things like dysentery, cholera, and so forth. Especially, it's awful, but people die from dysentery all the time, including a lot of children, unfortunately, and it's just you end up dehydrated. So that's not to be too depressing, but that's the reality. We should. The idea here is to know what's going on and hopefully figure out something you can do about it. So then we'll go over dead zones, which are areas of low oxygen. And you'll find out what eutrophication is and what that has to do with it, what that has to do with farming and our way we design our cities and so forth. So that's, again, pretty eye-opening. All these so-called dead zones all over the world that form every year because of what humans do. And then we will dig into the topic of privatization vis-a-vis water. And so privatization is a huge topic, especially internationally, but somewhat domestically as well, because it is happening domestically. And it's just when you take a public good. So privatization is when you take a public good and then you sell it to a private owner, right? So there's any numbers of examples of this. I mean, particularly internationally, this has been an issue over the last like 50, 60 years, especially if you get into the whole history of development and geopolitics and all that sort of thing. There's a lot of privatization that goes on in areas of the world or countries of the world where the government had owned a resource like oil or land or whatever, and then privatizing it, which actually, now that I think about it, we went over this earlier when we looked at structural adjustment. If you remember the structural adjustment in the social environmental justice lesson, which is where the International Monetary Fund, you basically get a loan because the country government is having budgetary issues, and so they need a loan, and they can't get a loan from the private sector, so they go to the IMF. And if you remember, structural adjustment is when the IMF says, okay, we'll give you this loan. However, you need to change your economy in like this way and this way and this way and so forth. So they make these other demands, and that whole process is structural adjustment. Well, you may recall that one of the most common demands that the IMF has is to take some public good or public resource and privatize it, right? So whether you have, an oil, it's not that uncommon for the government of a country to own the oil resource, like it still does in Venezuela, for example. And so structural adjustment, if, let's say Venezuela goes through the structural adjustment, IMF may say, look, you need to sell off those oil, resources, the rights to the oil wells and so forth to some private seller, right? And so that is privatization. If you're interested in this sort of thing, you can look up the banana republics from the mid 20th century, where this happened quite a bit, where countries in Central America that had public land that just sort of let the people farm on it, and then you get a new government in there supported by the U.S. and other Western countries that say, look, there's this new president is all about privatization, and so we would had a tendency to support those types of people because we in the United States and corporations in the U.S. would benefit from it, because you have these public land, in this case, all these banana plantations and so forth that were actually very lucrative, that you could then sell off to some private entity, such as the Dole Corporation, which is now kind of has a stranglehold in the banana industry. Anyway, privatization has happened a lot. It's still happening both domestically and internationally, and you'll learn a little bit about that. And some of the impacts of that in terms of water. So public, a lot of places, water is a public good. It's a public resource. And so there's this pretty sad story in Bolivia, Cochabamba, Bolivia, about what happened when they privatized the water. So there's a couple videos there, and there's actually an article about that happening in the U.S. as well, nearby in Coatesville, PA. And then last two topics, we briefly go over the connection between water and hydraulic fracturing, or water and fracking. As it turns out, fracking uses a ton of water, a lot of water, literally tons of water, millions of gallons, which would actually weigh hundreds of tons or thousands of tons. And then the last topic is ocean acidification, which is something that not a lot of people talk about, maybe not a lot of people know about, but it's actually really important issue to consider. It's sometimes called the evil twin of climate change because it's caused by excess CO2 in the atmosphere. And so you'll learn about that process and how it works, and then some of the implications of that. And of course, there's a usual summary video. Okay, so that's an overview of this week and some insight into some of the other assignments that are coming up. As always, if you have any questions, let me know, and I look forward to seeing everyone on April 10th.